Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, wait, I need my headphones. Can you hear me if I'm unplugged?
Yeah,
I'll just count on the Zoom recording this time. How's it going?
good. My office got hijacked, so
I thought that we'd record this and then I could upload it to like a Google Drive or something that we'll share. And then with this episode, you want to just like I'll introduce myself, you introduce yourself and kind of talk about why we're coaches and just whatever comes up.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, it sounded really cool on the TikTok too.
Yeah, I know. I
That's a
think
good idea.
it's well, yeah, it's fun. I think it's something that people can get interested in, right?
Yeah,
This idea of strangers. And I also think it's really cool because as life coaches, we're like teaching people how to interact with life,
yeah,
right? And this gives us so many opportunities to do that. We might say things that we don't agree with each other, or we might have like, and that is great to be able to model what a relationship is like and how you get to know somebody from a place of curiosity and non-judgment.
yes. That is huge. I think, especially in this day and age, like that is missing so much.
Yeah. And I think, when I saw your videos on TikTok, that was one of the things I really resonated with was that idea, right? That's when you sit in that place and approach life, everything just takes on a different shade.
Yeah, yeah. I found that I stopped looking at people as threats, like when they didn't agree with me. And
Mm-hmm.
that was again like what I loved about your videos is that there were people that were like, nope, you're 100% wrong or whatever. And I think every video that you made in response always started with, thank you for the conversation. I love this. And that was something that just like drew me to your videos, because you were actually living what you were talking about as well, which is so important.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, for the public, why don't you tell people who you are?
Okay. So
Start.
I am Keith Dosh. I go by Master Cheese on all the socials. Uh, so all right, basically I was in 1995, so a long time ago. I joined the army because I was kind of really had no direction in life.
How old
And
were you then? Like, when did you go into the army?
I was 18 going on 19.
Yeah, so that's young.
Yeah, really
Good.
young. Um, and I haven't gone through anything what the men and women of today have gone through, but we were part of the first troops that went into Bosnia to sort of with the peacekeeping mission to stop the whole Bosnian genocide that was going on. And never been in a firefight or anything like that, but just the aftermath of that genocide that I saw, like I came home and I was completely different, but I didn't know why. Everything scared me. I was a paratrooper, which I loved jumping, and all of a sudden I hated jumping.
Mm.
I hated being in the military. I hated the complete uncertainty that came with not knowing when we were going, whether it's training, real world, anything. Like I just couldn't deal with it. I always had to have that knowledge of what was going to happen. And that just turned into a rage inside of me. And in fact, me and my wife were just talking about this today. It wasn't too bad when I was still in. I was stationed over in Italy, and it was there, but it wasn't too bad. And then when I got out, that's when a flip just switched. I became the most angry, emotionally abusive person you'd ever meet. I remember like there was a time that I got caught talking to another girl, like because my wife is kind of like 007, James Bond, like she will figure out a way. So she bought a one of this old thing, like we don't need them anymore with the cell phones and stuff, but had like the caller ID. It was like this a caller ID box that was off the phone. So she just plugged it into a phone jack we never used and then showed me the number. And within 5 minutes of screaming at her, she was apologizing to me. So I was wrong. And I convinced her that it was because she didn't trust me that she caused all of this. And I remember, in fact, one time where she just looked up at me and it was asked me to bring her to the hospital because she said, I think I'm going insane. And I agreed with her. Like, yeah, there is something wrong with you, because I would not blame myself for anything. So we ended up separating, getting divorced, and I realized that my problems followed me. In fact, they got worse. I started spiraling big time, and I had no idea what was going on with me. I turned to religion, and because I grew up in a church, and they always told us, like, if you're depressed or have anxiety, it's because there's something wrong between you and God. And if you don't know what it is, it's a secret thing that you've done that God's punishing you for, but he won't tell you what it is. Which is kind of a dick move, I would like.
Right. You're like, who wants to believe in that guy?
Yeah. Like going up to my daughters and being like, you guys are in trouble. Well, for what? Like, figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
passive aggressive.
Yeah. So when I started to see, like, I was the problem, that no matter where I went, my problems were still there. I'd be happy for like a week or so, and then I would just dive right back into the depression and all that. I was very violent. If somebody cut me off, it would be a personal attack. I would try to run them off the road. For some reason, driving was like so triggering for me. And I also thought all this made me like tough. Looking back now, I see like how I was just a small, weak, little man that was, trying to project this power that I didn't have.
Right. You're like, my armor's so big. My armor is so big.
Yeah. And it's like, no, like, I am the most pathetic person, And so after a little bit, I started to change just sort of by myself, like trying to be more loving, more caring, and be more friendly with my ex-wife now. And I don't know how, like, she's an angel, like a miracle in my life, because she forgave me for everything. And we got remarried. Yeah, 3 years after we separated, and then 1 year after the divorce. And now, back then, June 17th, it was 28 years total that we've been
so cool
together, and we are closer now than ever.
Yeah.
So when I started going back to college, and I ran into another veteran, and he was telling me about PTSD, and I was like, yeah, I do that. I went down the list. So he's like, you got to go to the VA. And I had this hope come up inside of me. And so I went to the VA, and I'm like, here's my answers. And the VA was like, yeah, we're not here to fix people. We're just here to medicate them and keep them coming in. I was told that I was bipolar. I was told like it was all these different things, that it wasn't PTSD. I was told that it was a loss of my innocence that I was mourning, and I should go to a grief counseling group. And, so walk into a grief counseling group with people that have just lost family members, children, parents, whatever. And I'm supposed to say, I lost my innocence. I'm like, that is just so disrespectful. Another doctor told me I should rub my legs and whisper to myself. So, and I get where it's like coming from. I've had other therapists say, yeah, it's like a calming technique and all that. But now I look like this, except I always had this angry look on my face. And when I would go to school, I would sit in the back of class and would not talk. And then you have these 19, 20-year-old kids, and I'm supposed to sit there rubbing my legs under my desk and like whispering, like, shut up. Okay. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I would call the cops on myself, like, if that was going on. And so there was just like so I ended up leaving, and I decided I'm going to become an alcoholic and just numb everything, and whatever happens in life happens. My wife got pissed. She ended up finding like the home number for the head of patient advocacy at the VA, which is not listed. I don't know how she found it. She's like a Google ninja. She called congressmen, senators, state and federal, everything. She went nuts. They ended up getting me in with a new doctor. And the problem is they don't listen to you. They read the notes on the screen while you're talking, and then they diagnose you based off of the notes from the other doctors. And so while I was telling her this is what my wife did, she wasn't listening to me. She was just reading the screen. And her response was, when I finished, she said, see, all those phone calls you made, that like that's also a sign of being bipolar, that overreact. And I'm like, you just diagnosed my wife as bipolar, like not me. Do you understand that? And she got all upset and everything. So I was like, see, this is a joke. Like they're not going to help at all. And everything was just, oh, here, take this medication. And then they'd come in, when I go back, I'm like, how are you feeling better? No. Okay, take this medication. So all of, like, I was coming down, going up, coming down, going up, like constantly. Finally they got me in with a great doctor, who I saw a couple months ago. He's a great guy. And he finally did a PTSD assessment score on me. And the worst, like severe PTSD, is 8. I scored a 74. So I was up there. So I'm like, all right, finally I have proof that this is, and I'm like, I'm not looking for money. I don't need a disability check. Like, I just want hope in my life.
Yeah.
At that time, I started taking classes in anthropology, and I stumbled upon a rite of passage model, and I decided I'm going to study myself, study veteran reintegration and why we're having all these problems. And this rite of passage model fit perfectly going into the military, and all the literature talked about that. Like it is a rite of passage. I even go a step further where it's not a job change, it's a cultural shift that you take going from civilian world to the military culture. But when you leave, it's just okay, now you fit in the military culture, and now we're just going to put you back in the civilian world, and thank you for your service, see you later. And it's just messing people up. Like they feel lost, they feel like they don't belong, and that's all stuff from just the transition back into the civilian world. So I started studying that and seeing all this stuff, and one of my professors, who I was so angry at the time, she was like, you have to look at every aspect of like this healing. And I hated life coaches. I thought life coaches were like people living in their parents' basements that were, couldn't handle their own problems, but just telling everybody else how to handle their problems. And I think there's definitely some like out there like that. Even though I just got kicked out of my office because my wife is home. So. But I started trying out some different coaching, and I started trying to practice the strategies they used, and I had an anxiety attack, and I shut it off like in 30 seconds just through a visualization. So I was like, all right, no, this can't work, So I dove more into it. Everything was working. I mean, it took some time. I had to put in the work and everything. And since I was kind of doing it, unsupervised, it took a little time for me to figure stuff out. And then I signed up for classes and started taking the courses specifically so I can train myself. Never thought I'd be starting a life coaching business and everything. And then a couple of people that I knew, they were like, yeah, well, I'll like practice on me, and started seeing changes in them. And I'm like, there's definitely something here. So I had some friends that are like, you need to do this. And to make a short story a lot longer, I went back to the VA. I did another PTSD assessment score with no medications, no therapy. My score dropped by 36 points, and they were like, how did you do this? This does not happen. And yeah, the only thing I use is I've fallen in love with cannabis and psilocybin. Like it is helped me connect internally instead of what the other meds did, which almost just disconnect. It made me feel numb. So it was like a disconnection. And these medicines just helped me connect, so much more. Yeah, so my life is just completely changed now. And that's why I love the coaching, and I love to see the changes in the people that I'm working with too. Like, I mean, that's just what fires me up in life. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the parts of your story that are so authentic, right? Like I was gaslighting my wife, right? I was this sort of abuser in the relationship. I was messed up. I had to try medication because when people, there's this culture of shame around those things,
Yeah.
right? And people
Yeah.
don't seek help. And that's really sad. And then there's a culture in life coaching of like, well, we must be perfect and know all the answers so we can give the answers. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about at all, right? Or people say something
Yeah.
like, oh, well, her life's messed up, so how could she be a life coach? And you're like, okay, you're still not getting it.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's
We're all
about
messed up.
those journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's finding new areas to grow, like
Yeah.
instead of hiding behind. There's a great book by this author, Dr. Edith Eger. She's a therapist. She's a Holocaust survivor. Um, and she just talked about how, we build these prisons up. And then even Brene Brown talks about vulnerability. We're so afraid of vulnerability. And she said, when we are afraid of it, it becomes this prison of shame that keeps us trapped inside. But if we move through it, I mean, it's so free, and it's cool too. So I'm a big like science nerd, and that was like one of the first things that I saw was, so we have black holes, and nothing can escape it. Everything just gets sucked in, and most of the time, that's what we try to do is we try to crawl our way out of a black hole. But there's a theoretical object called a white hole, which starts at a point of singularity and then expands outward. And so nothing can actually stay inside of it. Everything gets injected outwards. So at the end, at the bottom of a black hole, or whatever, however you say it, there's that, it comes to that point of singularity. So instead of trying to crawl our way back, if we turn and face that singularity and push through, then life explodes on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And that's why now I face vulnerability, with like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is who I was.
Even making friends with that shame, if and when it does come up, right? Like, oh, here's shame again. That's right. Yeah. How funny that it's visiting me. I thought I dealt with this little guy. Like, okay,
right.
Let's do this again, buddy. Right.
Yep.
Tackling it and wrestling with it in a new way, and then growing because of that.
And that's the thing. I mean, our brains are designed to move us away from pain and towards pleasure. So we're trying to move from the pain of that shame. But in reality, that's our minds trying to help us to grow. It's like, so it's actually a good thing. Shame is a good thing. Embarrassment, all that stuff, as long as we use it for what it's for, like to help us see the chinks in our armor so that we can grow through that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I really relate to your story. I had just sort of a rough life, poverty, mental illness in my family. And I was in a really bad car accident where I should have died when I was young, so wow. I had all these traumas. I was actually in a domestic violence relationship in my first marriage, right? Other way around, getting out of that, learning about that. And there came this point in my life where I was like, this can't be what it is. Like everybody just going out like, like smiling and like playing these roles, and like everything felt so empty. And I was like, this can't be it. It has to be more than this. And so same as you, like I went back to church and I went to India and I studied with this teacher and that, like just trying to find the depth of life, right? Like the juice of it. And then I found life coaching by accident, got in touch with the life coach, and like she turned that light around and I'm like, oh, the depth's here. Like it's juicy in here. Like, oh, I get it. Like I make life rich and juicy by going in, and then that like shines into my life, and my life has become filled with this depth and wonder and curiosity, right?
Yeah.
And so then when I looked into actually going to life coaching school and opening a business, same sort of thing. People I encountered, I'm like, this is embarrassing. I don't want to call myself a life coach, right?
Yeah.
Like this doesn't feel right. I don't have any right to give people advice. That's not what I'm doing here. And so I actually had this joke in my head. I'm like, could I market myself as the anti-life coach? And I'm like, that doesn't really work. So most life coaches are like, be happy all the time and reach your goals. And I'm like, well, I want to tell people that not to be happy all the time, right? Because that's not reasonable or helpful. And don't set any goals or destination, just enjoy the experience. So what do I want to sell, right? I'm like, I'm a life coach that sells doing nothing.
Yeah.
But, then sort of going forward into the profession and trusting it would come, then I realized, some of the things you're talking about, like, okay, it's about my needs. It's about my authenticity. It's about how this shows up for me. It's about Right. And then as I started to work with clients and help them investigate themselves and their own wisdom and knowing and body knowledge, right? Then it became a little bit more concrete, like, okay, I'm meant to do this by helping people help themselves, right? Like turning
Yeah,
that inward and holding that space for that curiosity and that expansion.
that is so, oh, I love that. Yeah. And I love how you found it's that same thing that you had that moment where you're like, oh, the light isn't here. That's where I have to go. Because I think that's the thing that's so cool about life coaching is that's where from what I found, that's where they direct you.
Yeah.
You know, there's none of the external thing. It's always this internal thing. I love that.
Yeah. What story are you telling yourself about that? What's going on inside of you? And I think just there's sort of this culture like, do what you're told, just don't, stay
Yeah.
status quo. And that was a big part of your story with the VA. Like, oh, we're just going to give you some drugs and then just be a functional member of society, like be a good boy, be a good girl, right? And there's this tremendous pressure for that. Just be normal, walk the line.
Yeah.
And I feel like life coaching is giving someone permission to not do that.
Yes.
I feel like that's what I do for my clients. They come to me and they go, well, I kind of this and I kind of that. And I go, yeah, you have permission to do what you want. And they go, I
Yeah.
do. And I go, yeah. And then we look at it, right? And because that's hard to do when your parents and your society and your religion and all these things are telling you, don't look inside yourself, don't follow yourself, you can't trust yourself. Question, see what everybody else thinks about you.
Yep. Yep. It's like that movie, Don't Look Up. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think I have.
I think it's on like Netflix or something, but like this asteroid is coming and these astronomers are like, hey, we got to prepare because this asteroid's will destroy the Earth. And the government's like motto becomes don't look up. It's not a problem. Don't worry about it. And then
Right.
it ends up destroying everything. And that's what it is. Like
Yep.
our answers are inside, you know. I even get to the point like where the courses that people sell, like I like that, but then I'm also like, we're all different. So it all has to be tailor made. You know what I mean? So, but there is that foundational thing like that we can put into courses and stuff like that. But then it's like, yeah, it's got to be specific to the person. And I think that's why like I'm really drawn to like the one-on-one stuff because everything is always different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like the one-on-one stuff a lot more. I think it's more rich and deep. I
Yeah.
think when you're facilitating a group, which I used to do a lot in person, and I'm going to try to do more in Zoom in the future to see what it's like. It's cultivating a safe space for everybody to reflect off each other and share that space
Mm.
versus just you and a client reflecting and sharing that space. So I think role of the coach is a little bit more role of a facilitator. And so it kind of changes the dynamic. But I agree with you. The one-on-one stuff is so rich. And
Yeah.
I just love a day after working with clients and hearing everybody's stories. And no, I've never heard a story that I haven't thought was beautiful.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. What's like the like if one pops to your mind right away, like what story would that be?
Um, I was working with a woman who, just like we're talking about, very strict life, strict family, strict culture. And the choice was, do I follow in the right path and the right footsteps and make my family happy and my society happy and do what I'm supposed to? Or do I take this tremendous risk of losing everything, thinking my family's going to hate me, I'm going to destroy them, I'm never going to have, all the thoughts that you're, and walking through that process, right?
Yeah.
And there is no right or wrong answer for anybody who's in that situation. Either one of those could be a fulfilling life, right? You can choose things and there's always wonder.
Yeah.
But it's an honor to help somebody get outside of their own head and look back in. And I think that's why we all need each other, because like, I love learning by myself. I learn by myself, sounds like you're the same way. You read a
Yeah,
lot, you think a
yeah,
lot, you journal, right? Um, but I still need people to reflect me back to me to help me see outside my own brain.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I started about 6 months ago, meeting up like once a week with a group of friends and entrepreneurs and everything. And everyone's like younger than me. They're all like the millennials and stuff. And of course, we're supposed to like hate on the millennials, but I have learned so much from that. It is incredible. Like even just learning, like I could do what I want.
Yes.
I could
Yeah.
buy the thing that I want, no matter if somebody else thinks it's stupid or, a waste of money. Like I can still do that. That's okay. And I'm like, why am I 45, 40, or 48 now? And like just realizing this now,
Totally.
but we are so trained to be the robots, to be like a cog in an assembly line, from kindergarten up. You go to school, sit down, shut up, don't say anything, don't talk to your neighbor, and this is the way you have to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I love this younger generation and they give me so
Yeah,
much hope. And I know that a lot of people are really upset about the state of the world, and understandably so, right? Like it's kind of gnarly out there, you
yeah,
know? Um, but man, then that's one of the things I love about TikTok actually is there's so much love and creativity and people realizing that they don't want to play this game anymore. They're going to show up
yeah,
differently and force the game to change.
yes,
And that every time I see somebody like that when I'm scrolling, I'm like, yes, there's like more of us. We're waiting the scale of shifting like human evolution and consciousness
yes,
to not
yeah,
have our values stemmed from how we make the capitalist society money.
yes, yeah,
Like, wow, we're more than that.
right, yeah, yeah. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think, the balance for a lot of people is, okay, I start to believe that, I'm thinking that, but how do I feed myself? What does this
yeah,
look like practically in the world? And that is, I think, where a lot of coaching comes in, is people trying to actually bridge that path. And how do I get out off the hamster wheel? How do I get out of this? Not just like life itself and how do I feed my kids and pay my rent, but also how do I get out of this belief system? Like I'll say, the Christian belief systems are ones that are really rooted in there. How do I not think that all my righteousnesses are filthy rags when I've been told that for so long, right? What do you do to weed that out of your head so it's not clanging around in there messing things up? And that takes time and intention and attention to take a look
yeah,
at.
yeah. It's I'm still I'm still working on it. I feel like
Oh yeah.
I've made huge strides, but I still like apologize too much because it's such a natural habit, and even just like how my brain is wired to do it because I've done it so much. And the thing I'm like trying to do is I figure like, well, it was the language that I was telling myself in my head, that created that environment in my head. So if the language that I used did that, then the language that I use can change that. And
Yeah.
it's not a thing of like having to focus on stopping doing that,
Yep.
but like, so tonight I'm a part of a pool league on Friday night. So we have pool and everybody's drinking and people have tempers, you make all these great shots and, they're happy. You miss that one shot and they're just like losing it. And so if I'm like in somebody's way, I'm always quick to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Even though like, I mean, I didn't do anything wrong, I mean, and there isn't any wrong. So making that intention when I go there, I never say sorry,
Mm,
unless I've done something wrong.
yeah.
Um, instead of just saying excuse me or go ahead, you're good, whatever. So I can say and still accomplish the mission, which is to get out of the person's way that's shooting without taking blame for it on myself. But like you said, that intention is massive. I think that's where it all starts, the intention.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I would say that I am the same way, like people pleaser, right? Apologizer. I think that's how we're trained to be in society. And so I would
Yeah.
argue that 98% of us are that way. And it's an unlearning for all of us.
Yeah.
And on the I'm sorry thing, I'm not even as far as you are to be able to recognize it in the moment and do it. Sometimes I can, right? Like, oh, I'm about to say I'm sorry. I'm going to say thank you instead. Like, not I'm sorry, I'm late, like thank you for waiting, right? Changing that language like you're talking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems though, like most of the time, what it is right now is calling somebody up and saying, I apologized to you yesterday and I'm trying to change that. And I just wanted to say I wasn't really sorry. I don't think that was my fault. After I sat with it, I actually feel like this, right? And trying to just build my own accountability with myself
Yeah.
by like checking up on myself, like holding myself accountable for that and going back to the places where I show up as the person who I'm not like intentionally trying to be and correcting it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Because that takes, I mean, you talk about vulnerability.
Yep.
Like even just thinking about doing that, something even as small as like, apologizing to somebody that there wasn't an issue anyways, and then calling and being like, I apologized yesterday and I'm trying to hold myself, like I'm thinking of it's already just giving me anxiety thinking about doing that to anybody.
Yeah. What's interesting is it seems to have like that level of, holding myself accountable, being transparent and authentic. It either
Yeah.
makes people super uncomfortable and the relationship gets further apart,
Mhm.
or it opens the door for that person to also behave that way and the relationship becomes super close.
Yes.
Either way's a win for me, really. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so it's been interesting. And I think for the people who aren't ready for that, like that's fine too. It's just a
Yeah.
different experience of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know if you've run into this too, but a lot of times I'll talk to people, especially if it's somebody I know, and I'll explain things and they're like, no, no, and I remember when I was first starting in this whole journey myself that I was like, no, this is bullshit. Like this is nothing. Um, and then but I kept going back to it. So and then it almost felt like a puzzle piece just fell into place, and I'm like, oh, like all of a sudden I got it. And I've
Yeah.
heard that from a few people. They're like, you kept saying this stuff, and I was like, what are you, stupid? And then all of a sudden it connected in a different way with them, and they were like, I finally get what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a good example of why we shouldn't base what we say or how we show up on other people's reactions, right? We shouldn't look
Mhm.
out here to be like, is that okay what I said? Was I right about that? Because everybody is on these different journeys, right? We're all on these crazy sliding doors, and no two people may line up like, oh my gosh, we're at the same place in the journey, and then right. And
Yeah.
that connection, it isn't going to happen all the time with everybody, but it might happen, like you're saying, like months later or years later, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's why that person was in my life, or that's what they meant when they said that.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't have those experiences if you're not bringing your full self to the table. You're doing
Right.
people a disservice. Even if they're angry at you in the moment, that doesn't mean that they're not going to appreciate you in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so and this is with a family member, so I can get away with it. But I told them, like, we're gonna talk, but my goal is going to be to piss you off every time we talk. I said, I'll let you know when I'm going to start. And I'll let you know when we're done. So, but my goal is to piss you off. And I've heard that there's been some trash talking behind, like when I'm gone or something like that. I'm like, perfect. It's
Yeah.
exactly what we want to happen. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shaking things up when
Yeah.
they need to be shaken up.
That was this realization I had when I was angry. I was going for anger issues, going to therapy for anger issues. And I'm like, I don't have an anger problem. I have a mastery of anger. I practice it every day for the smallest things, so I decided like what I wasn't practicing was peace, was
Mm.
calmness, was being content. So I said, okay, I can't practice that when I'm calm. I can't practice being calm while I'm calm. So I have to go out with an intention of getting pissed off. And since driving was always like such a big trigger for me, I would drive in the slow lane, and I worked probably about an hour away at the time. So, a 2 hour commute both ways in the slow lane.
You had a lot
First
of
couple
time
of,
for investigation.
yeah, I mean, my knuckles were so white, my steering was like all bent now and stuff, and I was hating life. But now I can have people cut me off, and I'm just like, yeah, go ahead. I'm not going to take part in your. If I had a guy a couple weeks ago run a red light, cut me off, I had to slam on my brakes, and then he gave me the finger, and I just laughed. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't accept the misery that you're trying to give me. I don't need. You're good, buddy. You're good. You drive
Yeah.
off being miserable. I'm gonna drive off being happy.
Yep. Yeah. I think that I love the aspect of what you said, because it's all these things that we have, these tools we have, peace, right? Clarity. They're like muscles. And the more
Yeah.
you use them, the more they grow. And I always tell my clients, like, if I asked you to do 100 sit-ups today, you couldn't do it, but you could probably do one. Same thing here, right? If I asked you to never get angry again, you're not going to be able to do it. And so don't try to do it. And then when you're not perfect, shame yourself, right? Because
Right. Right.
it's going to be a process. You're going to have to exercise that over and over and over again until it gets stronger. And that's just the way it works.
Yeah. And that it's a learned thing for that perfectionism, because when you look at a baby trying to grab the keys, like, or like the little
Yeah.
thing you're dangling, and they don't do it. And after like 2 or 3 times, the baby doesn't go, son of a bitch, like I quit, I give it, it just keeps trying. Walking, we fall, we get back up. I mean, if we lived that all the time, if that was a natural thing, we would all be middle-aged people sitting on the floor with diapers on because
Yep.
we failed at walking and potty training.
Yep.
But then as soon as we go for our education, that's when we start to, and I love education. Like, I mean, I love learning, but that's when we start to learn that there's a way to do it, and you got to do it this way. And it's always about quieting the person,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other part, you actually did a TikTok video about this that I really loved, is about learning how to sit with the feeling, right? So you're trying to grow things, success, failure, success, failure. Some days you're 100%, some days you're 10%. And then on the back end going, I don't have to resist this feeling. Like I'm not good today. I'm just going to sit with this. And that it's actually the relationship with the feeling that's more important, like, than the feeling, right? Like, you
Yeah.
take away the resistance, you take away the fight of like, why am I not happy today? Why am I not motivated today? And you're
Yes.
actually closer to being motivated, right? Like that relationship with your feelings and understanding how to be in relationship with your thoughts and your feelings. I think that is like another thing that I'd say, okay, that piece of life coaching I really believe in is understanding that there's me, whatever that is, consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, right? Higher self. And then there's my thoughts, my feelings, and I'm in relationship with all these things. And what's my relationship with them?
Yeah.
Because when I look back at my life, I can see like how much suffering came because of my relationship with what I was going through.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That I hate when I have to practice this myself, but because but what they said, it's not the feeling that we have that's the problem. It's the meaning that we give to that feeling.
Yeah.
I think it was from a book, Buddha's Brain, The Neuroscience of Happiness, Wisdom, and something. There was a third one, but it was written by two neuroscientists that are also Buddhist practitioners, and they do meditation. They work at a Buddhist temple, I think, down in Florida. And they were talking about that. Like in Buddhism, they call it the second dart. So the first dart is, I wake up and I stub my toe on the chair. That pain comes. That's the first dart. Nothing you can do about it. The second dart is when I start yelling and blaming, Sandy, like, why did you move the chair? When she had, or whatever, or step on the dog or something. It scares me. And I'm like, why were you laying there? And that's the second dart that we throw at ourselves. So we get hit with that initial pain, and then we just start stabbing ourselves even more. And you can sit with, one of the coolest things I've found is, like, I still get depressed. It used to last for like months. Now it's normally like a day. And I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm depressed, but I'm happy. And my depression has gone from a feeling of like life is horrible, there is no hope, to I'm just slow today. I could be slow. I could watch, 5 episodes of The Office and laugh, and it's okay.
Yep.
And then I sit there and I'm just like, this is cool. Like, I
Yep.
enjoy this. Yeah.
Yeah. I always feel, I think I struggle more with anxiety than I do with depression, but sometimes I guess I would say all the time, I find the world to be overstimulating and I'm really empathic. So I feel a lot of people, I feel big feelings all the time. I can
Yeah.
read the news and cry for hours. Like I have to be very careful about what's here. And
Yeah.
sometimes it gets too much and I'll do the same thing. I'll close all my blinds. I'll watch reruns of The Office. I'll eat chips.
Yeah.
And then you know what? The next day I'm fine.
Yeah.
But my old behavior of pushing through that, making myself work, being tough on myself, right? Then it would become chronic
Yeah.
because I never let it like have its own space or its own seat at the table.
Yeah. And it just like hit me too, what you said, having a relationship with our feelings. It's almost like having a group of friends all inside of our heads. Um,
Mhm.
and we interact with our friends, all of our friends, in a different way because they all have different personalities. In the same way, our feelings have different personalities. And when
That is
we
so true.
yeah, and like when we like that was the biggest thing that changed my relationship with Sandy when we got remarried was I stopped viewing our marriage from my own self-centered perspective and realized the more I fed her needs, the more I got exactly what I wanted in the
Mhm.
relationship. Um, and so it was more like the more I served her, the more I got exactly what I want. So I'm like, wow, I can be selfish by being understanding and selfless. Like, so being selfless is the best way to be selfish. Like, it's just so weird,
Totally.
but if we take that same sort of mentality with our feelings and like, oh, okay, I'm angry today for no reason. Well, that this is my friend, my anger, and interact with it that way and be selfless towards it and allow it to run its course. It doesn't get as bad and it lasts, a fraction of the time that it normally does.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find the same thing is with like what I call my inner 2-year-old, right? Like
Yeah,
this part of
yeah.
me that like likes to throw fits still, that even though I'm
Yeah.
44, and letting even that have a voice, like, okay, I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to
Yes.
call a friend and say, like, can I like verbally vomit on you for a minute? Like, it's not fair. And then my timer goes off and I'm like, damn it, time to like shift and take accountability. Thank you, 2-year-old, but adult Mindy's taking over now, right?
Yes. Yes.
But again, when I didn't know how to do that, when I hated that part of myself and was like, you shut up,
Yeah. Yeah.
then it ran my life more
Yep.
because it just got louder
That's
and louder because it wanted to be heard, right? We all want to be
yeah.
heard.
It's crazy. I was just reading last night in this book, Evolve Your Brain by Joe Dispenza. And I was questionable about him in the beginning. He's a chiropractor. So I'm like, all right, but doc, like, and I believe in chiropractic care and stuff. I mean, not to the extent that like it's gonna solve a brain tumor or something. Like, I don't know, um, but he was talking about this cycle, this loop that we get in. And he's using, and this is why I love him, because he uses the neuroscience and all the science and not just like, hey, I know because I'm a chiropractor. But he was talking about the neuroscience of it, where if we have this thought, it's a negative thought, like guilt towards myself or shame, it releases chemicals like neuropeptides, which then make us feel guilty or insecure, which then sends a signal back to the brain to produce more thoughts about insecurity, which then release more of those chemicals that makes us feel. And so it's this loop that we go through. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So the more we focus on, I don't want to feel this, the more we're telling our brain this is exactly what we want to feel, and the more it makes us feel it, and then we fight even more. And
Yeah.
it's like,
And that it's actually something chemical happening in your body. Like whatever,
yes,
if you tell yourself a story that is negative or whatever, you're creating that chemical balance that is then reinforcing that story. That's crazy.
yeah. And then to turn around and
And
say, so tell yourself a different story.
yes, yeah.
Can't be
And
that
then the
easy.
opposite happens, right? You hack those brain chemicals and
Yeah.
then you start producing good, good juice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I think is funny about this, and I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but when I started playing around with this, there was this piece of me that said, that's not true. Like the positive thoughts aren't true. You're faking it. Like you're just, I don't know. It was somehow this belief that it was irresponsible to give up the negative thoughts, or that the negative thoughts were the ones that were keeping me alive and successful, and that I was arrogant almost to be happy and choose happy thoughts. Just a bunch
Yeah.
of like kind of weird belief systems about choosing my own thoughts. And somebody said to me once, I was having this conversation, and they said, Mindy, why does it matter if it's true? If you tell yourself everybody hates you and you go out into the world and you have a certain experience, right? You tell yourself everybody loves me, you go out into the world, you have a certain experience. That's completely made up. Who cares which one's true?
Yeah.
How does it make you feel? And then that, I was like, jaw drop. Like, yeah, you're right. It's all make believe. Like, I can tell myself anything and it doesn't matter if it's true. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying like get crazy and believe lies, but
Right. Right.
if you think that if there's something inside of you or me saying, you can't say you're beautiful, you can't say you're talented. Well, you know what? You are. So just own it. And it doesn't matter if it's true. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that brings me right back to church, like you were saying earlier, like filthy rags. I mean, we heard that all the time. 5 years old, and I deserve to burn in a lake of fire for all of eternity.
Crazy.
Not only burn a lake of fire, but where the worm dieth not, which it says like in Matthew or something. So I'm gonna be being eaten by worms while I'm burning, and I'm 5, like, and that's what I was like, holy crap. So you learn that you are nothing, and then pride. Well, I mean, that's how Lucifer fell, pride.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for me to sit there and say, oh, I'm good at something, can't say that. That's prideful. So yeah, and it just controlled everything.
Yes, that is exactly it. Totally. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And breaking free from that is, I guess, yeah, it's just so freeing, right? It's life changing.
Yes.
It is, I kind of feel like it's like all the joy and all the love and everything's here, but you just gotta like open the door to it. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's more about, I think it's like, there's a Rumi poem that says, I don't have to go seek for love. I just have to remove the barriers inside myself that exist to it already being, right? Like that sort of concept.
Yes.
All this stuff is here already. I'm not lacking any of it. It's just removing whatever barriers or thoughts or barriers, right, is blocking me from actually experiencing it in this moment.
That is awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And all
Yeah.
this stuff, like easier said than done. It's a practice, right? But that's why it's good to
What it
have other
is.
people. And that's why it's good, you know, to have a life coach and go talk to somebody and have them help you reframe things until your brain learns to reframe things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I always tell everybody. Like my goal in working with everybody is to never have to talk to them again as fast as possible. Not that
Yeah.
that's like I don't ever want to talk to them again, but I want them to go out and take that, see that change, and then just blow their life up,
Yep.
and I just want to watch them fly. I mean, that's what gets me so fired up.
Yeah. Yeah. What's cool about my practice now, because I started in 2010, is that I've actually had a few clients come back years later, like, hey, I'm up
Really?
against something else in my life now. I thought we could talk again. I'm like, yeah, we can
Oh,
talk.
that is awesome. Yeah.
Right.
I
And
was
it's
I was thinking
so
about that the other
cool.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. And you kind of catch up and then you're like, okay, let's dive in. Let's do this thing again. We're going to face this thing. And then when you're through it, you're going to go shine. It's going to be your butterfly phase again, right? Like we're going to get through your cocoon phase together. And then you're going to go do your butterfly phase and it's going to be awesome.
Did you see that was it easier the second time around? Like they already had this sort of foundation and then they just needed a little bit of like sort of maintenance or tweaking or something?
I think the investigation felt very much the same. I think
Mm,
what made it easier is knowing their language and their history,
yeah,
because part of coaching is understanding what can this person relate to? What story can I tell this person so that they understand this concept? And so the more shared stories you have with an individual, you're like, remember when we talked about this, like, or you mentioned this, it's kind of right. And so more reference points, I think, are always really helpful.
yeah. I like how you said that too, the investigation. Because that's what it seems like. I'm like, I'm gonna ask you like an annoying amount of questions.
Yep.
But that's what it is. It's an investigation into who they are and why they do what they do and what they're made of, you know. I love that.
Yeah. You called yourself a seeker, which I really related to. And I recently thought of something that I changed that to, because I used to call myself a seeker all the time. And now I call it myself an epiphany hunter,
I like that. Yeah, it's like a treasure hunter, but for the epiphany. I
right? Because
love
that's
that.
why you're like, oh, what else is here? And then you have those little ahas and they're so beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
And for me, like, is that why we're here? Because it seems to me like that's why we're here.
yeah. I saw, I think I read it somewhere a little while ago, but like basically, we are how the universe is aware of itself. We are how the universe
Mm,
experiences itself. You know,
yes.
almost like we're the like neurotransmitters for the universe or the brain cells for the universe. And
Yeah.
I always thought that was so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about that concept is, and this is just what I love about humans, it it trips me out that there's things about me that I love that I can't control that I love. Like even silly things
Yeah,
like I like to eat sunflowers until the like little bumps are on my lips, like at a baseball game. Like it's so
yeah,
why do I like that? Like that's just some weird thing. Like authenticity is so weird. Like consciousness came into this body and this body likes to garden and this body likes to eat sunflower seeds and this body, and I'm not even really in control of it, it feels like.
yeah, yeah,
But when I see that in other people, that's what's so beautiful. I'm like, oh, look at consciousness over there likes to create art, and consciousness over there likes to give lectures, and consciousness over there likes to do this. And so it's almost like, I mean, I don't use the word God very much, but if God is such a thing that you're getting to see all these like different facets of, you know,
yes,
consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it, and all these people's authenticity. And I love that. And that's why I love authenticity, because when someone's playing the game and trying to do it right, you can't see that in them.
yeah,
And then you're like, I wonder what
yeah,
you really like. You have a natural thing that wants to come through. What is it?
yes, yeah. I man, that really like hits me because imagine if we could all just see the world and instead of somebody doing something different or being different, judging that, well, you're not like me, you know, so you're bad, but instead just taking the wonder in the differences,
Yes.
you know, I mean, how much more peace we would have in society.
Yeah. And I think sort of collective wisdom,
Yeah,
because I can't possibly fit all the wisdom in my body of a being, right? So you have a piece of it too. So the more that we can learn from each other, and if we're in that curious space of wonder that you said, then we're like, okay, I can learn from 1,000 of you, right? And
yeah,
more of this, because everybody just has a little piece of it.
right. That I always used to beat myself up about I don't know enough to actually do this. Like we were talking about, like giving
Yeah.
advice and stuff. And I need to go get my master's degree. And then of course that
Mhm.
wouldn't be enough either. So I gotta get my doctorate and I gotta specialize in something. And I'm like, I'm interested in doing all of that, but my interest it spans too much. You know, I want to know physics, I want to know quantum mechanics, I want to know neuroscience, but not like the squishy brain stuff that's gross, like the imagination part of our minds, you know, how expansive that is, how there's a universe. I want to know everything about our universe and cultures and people and behaviors, and I just want to know everything, you know, and
Mhm.
it just opens us up to more and more and more so that we see that at the same time that we are absolutely nothing, we are also the center of the universe. And both are true at the same time. Like, that makes no sense, but I love it.
Yep. And that's, I think, kind of how all life is it's, oh my gosh, this feeling is the most important thing to me right now. I have to get this job. My relationships, and it means everything. And also it means nothing.
Yes.
And right, in 20 years, I'm going to look back and be like, why was I so freaked out about that thing? I'm over here now. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like kind of embracing that like strange piece of life that it's both everything and it's kind of meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. I call myself an optimistic nihilist, like
Yeah, I
nothing
love that.
matters. And that is beautiful. That frees me up to, I got hurt at work and so I had to be retired. I had to get a new hip thrown in, and I worked in the prisons, and I couldn't be in the prisons anymore. So, and that's when I went to school. And it started happening. My mind will take like this quick left, and I'll be like, I'm talking about this, and then I'm thinking about like the grocery store for some reason. I don't know why. And it just did that. And I don't know what I was talking about. But it would have been a cool story. I promise you. Yeah, it would have been a cool
My
story.
brain does that too. I'm like, oh, this is my, ADHD at play, where my brain's like, oh, something shiny.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when I talk about this stuff, because everything you're saying, I'm going all over the place, but like, and I'm listening to, and then I'm saying, then sometimes my thoughts get louder than the words I'm saying. So I'm just like, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Who is it? Michael Scott. Yeah. In The Office, that said, a lot of times I don't know what I'm saying. I just keep talking and hope I end up somewhere. I'm like, I got that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also sometimes think there's wisdom in that, right? In that flow. I had the privilege of seeing the Dalai Lama once. It was amazing.
Oh, wow.
And so they kind of like bring him out on stage, and, then he like calls his assistant back over, and they're whispering, and he's like, okay, so I forgot what we were supposed to talk about today, but she said we were talking about this. And so let me think for a minute. Okay, this is about, and it was like all in the present moment, right? It wasn't like he came
Wow.
with cards and had a speech prepared. He accessed the moment, right? And what it brought. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, is like, you're chasing thoughts, but ultimately it's just leading to whatever the present moment wants to give birth to.
Yeah. Actually, that would be a pretty cool name for the podcast, Chasing Thoughts. I love that.
Chasing thoughts. Yeah. And I think that's sometimes what can get frustrating for people in a coaching session, is that takes time sometimes,
Yeah.
right? You chase it all the way over here and you think you got it, and then no, that's not it. You chase it. And it takes a lot of investigation, especially depending on how much something's hidden in your brain. Like if you've hidden it from yourself really well, it could take some work to chase thoughts until you find that thing, that nut of whatever it is that's like bothering you, or that like nut belief system or thought. So when people ask me what coaching sessions are like, I'm like, well, sometimes they're exciting and like, oh my gosh. And sometimes they're really boring. And sometimes you're doing the work, and it's all of it, right? And staying in there for the process is when you see the ultimate success.
Yeah. 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 That is a perfect way to put that. I love that. Yeah.
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 Okay,
Just
cool.
sitting with the process.
This was a really good talk for an hour. I like it.
Yeah, I do.
People think.
I'm like so thrown out because like I can't hear myself because I have these on, but then my voice comes through here. So I feel like I'm being like completely monotone and everything. And I'm like yelling. Yeah, this is going to take some getting used to, but yeah. Yeah, this was really cool though.
Yeah. So I would say if anybody watches this in the internet land after we post it, if you want to talk about something, DM us, post it on a below or something, because I'd love people to just suggest topics for us to dig into if that's interesting for people. And I think people don't know, like, one thing you mentioned was like, what's suffering? Like, is it good? Is it bad? How do we suffer? What's the purpose? Like, so if there's subjects out there that people are interested in, like, let's just keep diving into subjects.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's just the way I live. So I'm down for that. Definitely, man.
Cool.
Yeah.